Hey Steve, it's good to connect with you again. Where exactly are you at the moment?
I'm on the island of Icaria, and it's a Greek island in the north of Aegean Sea, just off the coast of Turkey. Really beautiful. It's one of the smaller islands. It's known as a blue zone. It's renowned for its people. People live to extraordinary long lives here. I think like out of every 100 people, there's three that reach over 100, which is pretty extraordinary in itself. It's a pretty amazing statistic. So it's been studied as a blue zone, meaning that the lifestyle of the people results in extreme age.
And
People live
what
a
is
long
it
time.
that what is it that they do there that you notice that gives them such a great chance of living such a long life?
I think it's just the lack of stress. I mean, we know that you need stress to an extent. A certain amount of stress actually keeps you young, but they don't have the mental and emotional stress like they do in a lot of Western countries,
Uh-huh.
like in the United States. And they're not ambitious people. They don't care about keeping up with the Joneses or amassing a lot of material wealth. They're happy with a simple life. So a lot of them are pretty poor, but they don't care. They have everything they need. And of course, the diet is really impeccable. It's a Mediterranean diet.
Hmm.
And of course, everything's grown right here in the island, just about.
Yeah,
Just really delicious food made very
I've al-
simply. And people just don't overeat either. That's another thing.
and in terms of their activity, are they very active people or
Actor, yes. A lot of them have uh, jobs that require physical exertion. Like there's a lot of guys that fish here, but most of them herd goats, and it's very hilly. So just walking around here, you're up and down hill all the time. And most of them garden. They grow their own food. They have their own fruit trees and gardens where they're out busy, in the garden every night. And they walk great distances.
that's awesome. It's interesting that you mentioned that they're, simple people without, a lot of ambition. In America, we would see that as a bad thing, and minimalism here is sort of a trendy thing where people have to force themselves to try to be simple, and it actually, in the process, tend to create a lot of stress just trying to live a simple life. So
Well,
you're damned if
well,
you do.
if you look at the latest statistics, you'll see that the United States is pretty far down the list as far as quality of life. Our life expectancy is only like 37th. No, wait, it was 17th. But our quality of life was like 37th.
Hmm.
It's not very good.
No, and
And you'll find like places with great weather. Like when I was a kid, California is a paradise, but really California is like one of the least happy places on earth. People are really, really a lot of fear and a lot of trepidation. Uh, but there's a lot of places like that all over the world where people
Mhm.
have a lot of material things, but they're just in this constant fear state, worry, you know, uh,
Oh,
overpopulation, pollution.
mhm.
Of course, you got your droughts, wildfires, and earthquakes in California too to keep you.
Yeah.
So, it's not always about being in perfect weather or having a lot of material things.
Hmm.
People work real hard to get those things, and then they worry about keeping them.
Sure. And then you add
Sometimes
nutritional
that thing
stress,
is, yeah. So
lack of
sometimes I
physical
think,
exercise.
yeah, I think it's better to have little sometimes.
Oh
You don't
yeah.
need much.
Um, is this your last trip? I know, last year on a London Real episode, I think it was, you were talking about making a home base in Maui, and then when I saw your email that said you were moving home to Washington, I was a little surprised. Um,
Well, it's not my Washington isn't my home per se.
uh-huh.
It was Teresa's for a while, but
Mm,
I looked at all the places all over the world, and a real concern has to be global warming. A lot of people are pretty alarmed about it. I'm not an alarmist, but I am a pragmatist. And I just looked at all the places that are least affected by global warming, and lo and behold, the Olympic Peninsula is one of those places. So I thought, yeah, why not? Teresa's mom lives there, and we bought a tiny home, and in Spokane, Washington. We had it delivered to Port Townsend, and it's just a really great place to be. Her mom has this huge house in the country, 5 acres, and she's all by herself. And it was just like a win-win for everyone,
Mhm.
We can keep an eye on her mom, and we have a free spot to park our tiny home, and it's really nice. Maui is probably not a good place to move with the new global warming trend and the rising seas. There's a lot more storms and such, so they're going to be getting hit with a lot of gale force winds and hurricanes. Not to mention, it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter there. So I'm not a real hot weather fan myself personally. So maybe I shouldn't be telling everyone about this place.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be like Oasis. Denver used to be this like unknown country town. Then we legalized marijuana, and the whole country moved here, and it changed overnight. So, yeah, keep your paradises to
There you
yourself,
go.
or you'll be overloaded with
Yeah.
people. So is this your last? Is this your last camp
But
before you move
so
home?
Port Townsend's a place, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I think I'm going to curtail the. I'll do some travel within the U.S. and maybe just like a day or a weekend here and there. But I'm not going to be doing any more overseas things for a while. Now that could change. I may start to get restless legs and want to get up and start moving again. But I sure would look forward to just taking some time off. Travel can be pretty innervating and pretty tiring,
Oh, I'm sure.
especially when you do as much as I do.
Yeah.
I mean, really, literally every couple of weeks you're in a new place.
Uh-huh.
I could see the possibility of maybe just picking 4 of my favorite spots and maybe just spending a few months here and a few months there. That would be nice.
So
That's a very real possibility.
I did have a couple questions for you, Steve. So, you've traveled all over the world. If now that you've kind of can look back and on all your trips and all the places, I know you've talked about trying to integrate different health systems into your practices, but I don't know if maybe you could summarize, like 3 or 4 themes from all the different places that might be universally applicable to everybody that you see.
3 or 4 things from every place I've been.
Or, I don't know if there's like some universal themes that you've seen between, Europe and Asia and different places where,
Yeah, no, I get you. Well,
yeah.
I mean, this could be long. I've
Uh-huh.
learned a lot of really amazing things from different spots, but universally, with the time travel, jet lag can be very real.
Uh-huh.
So you really see the importance of sleep and what sleep deprivation can do to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, I really learned to get comfortable with going to bed very, very early and getting up very early.
Uh-huh.
And you just cannot beat sleep. It's just that so important. So it was always a challenge to make sure I was getting plenty of rest. And I would say that probably the number one health thing you could do, even more important than diet in many ways, is to get sleep. And the world's so busy and people are on the go so much. People really aren't getting sleep. But, I do a lot of online programming, fitness training and fat loss programs.
Uh-huh.
You really are not going to be successful in losing body fat if you are sleep deprived.
Uh-huh.
And if you're an athlete and you want to do well in a given sport, you're never going to do well unless you really get your sleep down. So I'm pretty good, man. I'm really good at adapting to time zones, and I make sure I get into bed early, and I love getting up early. there's a lot of times I'm in bed by 8:30, as the
Hmm.
sun's going down. So bed with the sun and up with the sun.
Sort of the circadian rhythm of things. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, most
The
of your
other thing
book.
is, of course, with
Yeah.
diet, you really want to get a lot of raw produce as much as you can, fresh fruits and vegetables. It doesn't matter what kind of diet you're on, whether you choose, like a paleo, low carb thing, or if you are including like starches like in the Mediterranean. The bulk of the diet, no matter what it is, should be good fresh produce, preferably organic and locally produced if you can get it. But I'll tell you, that's the mainstay of my diet. And you can almost always find fresh produce, even in airports. They sell stuff, salads and things like that. Not always the highest quality, but certainly beats eating pizza or something like that. So, I'm as soon as I get to wherever I'm at, we make sure we get down to a local supermarket or outdoor market and load up in fruits and vegetables and keep it in our hotel room or our Airbnb. So that's another very important universal thing I think you'll hear from almost any dietitian or nutritionist. Make
Mhm.
the base of your diet good fresh produce, and then the rest is kind of like just details.
Yeah. Have you ever experimented with any of the fad diets yourself? You never seem to, when you talk about diet, it never seems like you follow any sort of specific, like really regimented diet program, like vegan or paleo. So you don't seem to subscribe to any of that stuff.
I eat what they call the mixed diet, and
Uh-huh.
but I'm very careful about the way I combine my foods. So
Yeah.
you might say it's a food combining diet.
Hmm.
It's nothing new. The Yos talked about this 4,000 years ago. So I guess that would be my third thing I've picked up. Uh, don't mix a lot of stuff in one meal. You overburden your digestive system. More and more is being found out about the gut and the gut health as it pertains to your health and your energy, your immunity, your immune system, and everything. It's all set in the gut.
Hmm.
And people that load it up with just all this different stuff in one meal, and having a dessert on top of that, they're doing themselves great disservice. By overburdening their digestion, they completely impair their health, their immune system, and everything else. So I'm very careful about the way I combine my foods. And probably if you just had one food combining rule that you wanted to use to instantly improve your health, don't mix starch and protein in the same meal. Like sandwiches, for example, like with meat or cheese in them, or having bread with your meals if you're going to have like some kind of animal protein.
Hmm. Is that because
If you're going to have starch, have it by itself.
yeah, is that because the sugars and fats don't mix well together? I think I've heard that somewhere that's not a good combo.
Well, it takes completely different enzymes to digest
Hmm.
starches from proteins. It's very hard for the body to break this down. And when you overburden the system, a lot of the food remains only partially digested, or in some cases even undigested, and it can create a lot of gas. And that gas is the result of either putrefaction or, in some cases, fermentation in the gut, and it's very unhealthy. A lot of that the waste gets reabsorbed back into the bloodstream, can cause all sorts of inflammation, all kind of stuff. So I find that just by simplifying my meals and keeping them very, very simple, my digestion is so much better. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I'm never sick. I mean,
Hmm.
but not just to brag, you know, but it's just I'm just stating a true fact.
Yeah.
I've been traveling now for years and years and years, and and airplanes are considered the filthiest place on earth. And you're always in contact with all sorts of germs and viruses and such. Yet I never get sick, which proves one thing: germs and viruses aren't necessarily the cause of disease. It's your own weakened immune system and lack of sleep and overeating or mixing too many I call it crowded nutrition when you just crowd so many things on your plate those are two of the biggest reasons people are sick and unhealthy and overweight. It's you literally eat less when you just have just a few simple foods on your plate. I'll give an example. Like yesterday, I had goat that had been roasted in the oven and these cooked greens and a salad. That was it. I didn't eat for 6 hours after that. And then for supper, I had chia seed pudding made with chia seeds and some soaked figs. That's it.
That's
Stuff like
awesome.
that. For breakfast that morning, I had locally grown apricots. The apricots grow right in the trees around here. You can pick them right off. I had apricots and a few grapes, and then I waited a few minutes, and I had a yogurt drink. Took yogurt and I diluted it, and I mixed it with some of the raw honey, and the honey grows right here too. I mixed it up real good. It wasn't real sweet, just a little sweet to take some of the sourness. And so I sipped this yogurt drink and switched it around my mouth. So yogurt drink for breakfast, roasted goat with cooked green and a large raw leafy green salad for lunch. And then about 5 hours after that, I just had a small bowl of chia seed pudding. It was actually something I bought in a health food store. You just mixed it. It already had like some dried fruit in it. You just mix it with water and let it set.
Is
But
there any,
simple. That's
yeah,
what I'm talking about. Simple,
sure.
simple, simple.
Is there anything you won't eat, or is it just more a matter of just not combining certain foods?
I won't eat desserts. I won't eat pies, cakes, cookies, cereals. I try to stay away from refined grains. I don't mind having non-refined grains. Like yesterday, I had quinoa. Now,
Mhm.
quinoa isn't even a grain, really; it's a seed. But it's now I'll have a starchy grain or starchy seed like quinoa or amaranth, once in a while. I'm not afraid of starches. I don't believe that carbohydrates make you fat. It's a bunch of silly nonsense. But when I do eat starch, it's only by itself with nothing
Mhm.
else. I don't load it up with a lot of butter. I won't have it with meat. I won't have chicken and rice and things like that. That keeps my digestion pretty strong. I rarely suffer any kind of abdominal distress. Another way people can tell if the diet's working for them. Number one, of course, you're not fat. If you're fat, your diet's not working. And if you're not fat, okay, you're probably doing pretty good with the macronutrients and calories. But if you're sick all the time, your diet's not working. You shouldn't be sick. It's not natural to be sick, even though in modern society, people are so weakened that they get sick all the time and they just consider it normal. Oh, I
Mhm.
picked up a bug for my wife and my kids. Well, that's a bunch of nonsense. I'm
Yeah.
around sick people all the time and I don't get sick. And why is that? Because my immune system's strong. Why is
Mhm.
that? Because my digestion is excellent. I don't overeat and I get plenty of sleep.
Yeah.
It's really that simple,
Mhm.
you know. And of
Yeah.
course, the big medical industrial complex, the big pharma, they want to sell you on getting shots and immunizations and the drug. Every year there's some kind of new medicine or drug. I don't take any of that crap.
Oh, sure. My doctor tried to put me on statins at one point, and he literally and I wasn't eating healthy. This is before I had started taking an active approach to my health and fitness. But he told me, "Well, hey, if you take this statin drug, you won't have to worry about what you eat anymore." And
That's insane.
yeah,
Absolutely insane. It's like they try to put a band-aid on a gushing wound a lot of times with these drugs, and instead of and it's not even the doctor's fault, really. They've just been brainwashed in medical school because,
Mhm.
the big drug companies basically own medicine, They actually pay these doctors to give you these drugs. They're
Oh yeah,
paid. They have to tell you. I don't use a doctor and I haven't been to a doctor in 40 years, but you can ask your doctor and say, hey, are you paid to give me this drug? And they have to answer truthfully by law. Most people never think of it. But if you look
right.
at the list of all the side effects of all of this stuff, wow,
Hmm.
who the hell in their right mind would take this crap? But people don't want to be responsible for their own health. We, in the United States in particular, from the time you're a little kid, you're brainwashed into basically giving up the responsibility for your own health care and your own well-being to the doctor.
Yep.
And people seem to like it that way because now they don't have to think too much for themselves.
Well,
And, it gives them an excuse to be basically lazy about their own health care.
yeah, for sure. And, in the, big food business too,
Monsanto foods
they want you to overeat and overburden your body and basically consume calories and drinks and anything you can stick down your mouth all day long for the sake of getting your money. And
you ever notice that it's like superfood of the month, in a lot of these magazines?
oh yeah,
That's big agribusiness pushing some weird crop that people have never heard of. For a while, it was kale this, kale that.
hmm oh, and
But
then
kale's no more nutritious than any number of leafy greens. And
sure.
eating it raw, you can't digest it. It's completely indigestible. It's
Oh
an
yeah,
abdominal irritant. And then there was remember the acai?
hmm
It's that fruit with the weird C that looks like a kind of a cross between the S and the C, acai.
hmm
Anyway, that's another one. The good old fashioned American plum has just as much nutrition as acai, but
hmm
with trade agreements and agribusiness the way it is, they'll push a particular product, and
absolutely,
the big
for sure.
companies make their money.
Just turning to fitness, Steve. I know there's a lot of different philosophies around the world in terms of fitness. Asia is very into qigong and martial arts, and maybe you could highlight some of the things you've learned about different fitness philosophies around the globe.
Well, probably the single most important thing that a person could do to slow down aging is strength training. You got to do resistance training. That's the one area where a lot of people fall down. Even the people here in Korea, even though they live really long, many of them are pretty fat and they move really poorly. What moves you? Muscles move bones, and your locomotion, your ability to move, to walk upright, to stand, to get up and down off the floor, to walk, in some cases run, it's dependent on your muscles. So you got to keep the muscles strong. And just doing recreational type things, or even gardening or yoga or riding your bike or whatever, isn't enough. Your muscles will disappear. They just start disappearing pretty quick. Right after about 40, you start to get what they call age-related sarcopenia. And by the time you're in your 70s, you're way strong. You're way weaker than what you were when you're in your 30s or your early 40s. So you can stop that process. And in some cases, you still there? Hello?
Sorry, Steve. My kids are ringing my doorbell upstairs for fun.
Okay.
Yeah,
Fun.
they just woke up. I believe. Yeah.
So anyway, back to the strength training.
Yeah.
Very, very important. You can reverse sarcopenia even if it's already begun. But if you want to stay mobile and if you want to remain free, because once you become immobile, you're at the mercy of other people. You see these poor souls on the wheelchairs being lined up to take a flight somewhere. You become 100% dependent on somebody else once you lose your mobility. You can't drive, you can't go anywhere. And what keeps you from losing your mobility is increased strength. So that's number one. You got to strength train. Probably way more important than even doing aerobic type steady state.
For sure.
Although I'm a big advocate of getting out there and walking and gardening, and if you don't have any orthopedic problems, by all means, some slow running. I like this new type of running called Nico. It's really not new. It's been around forever. It's like Zen running. You don't care how far, you don't care what distance, you don't care your times. You're just running within the breath, almost like a moving meditation. I really enjoy that, getting out and doing my slow running. And I like some of the Chinese exercises in Qigong. And of course, I mix it in there with the Russian Slavic health system, the joint mobility work. And I've come up with my own routine, mixing, the best of Asia with the best of Russia and the West, and even some old school Western calisthenics.
Awesome. Well, that's a good segue. One of the things we wanted to, talk, reasons we wanted to get you back on with us is because we saw that you had recently released a new version of your mobility series. I was a huge fan and have been using the Encyclopedia of Joint Mobility for years. Used it to rehab from a car accident and football injuries, and so I guess what inspired you to create a new version of that, and what's different about this version of the series versus the old one?
It's simplified. What I found is that people just weren't doing the other stuff. It's too complex. A person like me or you will do it, but most people won't do it. So I realized, well, it's probably too complicated for a lot of people. And also, a lot of that was kind of geared towards martial arts, because I'm still very much involved with the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and I've been involved with Russian martial arts. The system is called Sistema. So I've been practicing these things even still. So it's very important that I have certain movement patterns and be able to move in a certain way. So that was part of the older mobility series. But it's good for anyone. It doesn't matter whether you do martial arts or not. It's just great for your health. But I realized that it's somewhat time consuming. I'm lucky because I've engineered my life to work the way, work my own schedule, not at anyone's beck and call. So, and I engineered my life to be that way.
Yeah.
It wasn't always that way. But I have plenty of time to do mobility in the morning, and a lot of people don't. So I thought, well, I should probably condense this down and look at the biggest bang for the buck. Maybe not quite as good as doing, some of the longer versions I've done in the past, but you still get tremendous benefit from it, because a lot of people are extremely time crunched. So that's why I did it.
Yeah.
Once again, it does not replace strength training. You still got to do some form of resistance training at least twice a week. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is, body weight or, machines or barbells or dumbbells or, whatever you like,
Sure.
It all basically works. You just have to really make this muscle work really hard against resistance.
And Steve, for those that may not be too, as familiar with the concept of mobility, maybe could you define like the difference between like stretching, flexibility, and mobility?
Yeah, I do this test actually in my like a little test. The difference between your mobility and your flexibility is usually your percent chance of being hurt. I have people that they partner up, and the person stands there with both legs straight, and then you slowly lift one leg up as high as you can, stretching their hamstrings while they hold on for balance. And then they lift the leg themselves to see what the difference between flexibility and mobility. The flexibility, basically, there's no muscular effort. It's just how much can the tissues deform. It's passive, whereas mobility is active, and there's a strength component to it. So, if I were to stand beside you and you put your hand on your shoulder, and I would just take your right leg, let's say, I can lift it up to a certain point, and then you can really feel the muscles getting tight. And at some point, you would just tap me on the shoulder and say, okay, that's enough. And I bring the leg down. And then from the same exact position, you would slowly, under power, without swinging it or using momentum, lift your leg up. That would be the difference between your mobility and the flexibility.
Okay. And
at least in your hamstrings, in your hip, in that one area of your body.
And it seems like
So
you
yeah.
emphasize mobility over static flexibility. But to what extent do you feel that folks should incorporate static stretching into their routine, or do they need to?
Uh, I do both, and I
Uh-huh.
think both are important. If I have particular movement patterns that feel a little bit tight, I'll actually do static stretching. And then I will go back and do a mobility drill using that same exact area, see if I can't get a little bit more range. For example, my rotational muscles in my torso got really stiff and tight for a while. All that traveling, I suppose, sitting in those long overseas airline flights. And so I was taking Systema in Tenerife with Colonel Alexander Maxime's off, and he was having me do these pretty intense Systema drills. They were falling drills where you would roll in these various patterns across your spine. And in Systema, you don't use mats. You learn to fall and take the fall on concrete because mats give you a total false sense of what it's really like to fall in real life.
Mhm.
So you start very slow motion and so forth, and you start seated and kneeling before you start doing things from the standing, and just learn to get real comfortable on the concrete. But we were doing these backward rolls across the diagonal, and I was really stiff. I wasn't able to do it. I wasn't able to rotate my torso the way I wanted to. It's a little frustrating. So each morning when I would wake up in bed, I would do this particular rotational stretch where I was getting stuck in the movement pattern. And I increased my mobility and flexibility to the point that I was able to master that particular roll on the concrete that he was showing. So, yes, I used static stretching, but it was all part of a movement pattern. And
Mhm.
so once I got the mobility back, I didn't have to stretch anymore.
Okay.
But I did. I did initially to get that movement. It's like I was working with a guy this weekend. He can't squat. That's a very, very good mobility drill. A lot of Americans cannot squat, and it's a very natural movement. When I say squat, not your toes, but down deep, butt to the floor, ass to your ankles, flat feet, without a excessively curved back. And in my workshops, it's amazing how many people cannot do that. And that's in my way of thinking. If you can't do a squat, you probably have no business doing a lot of other types of activities. You
Yeah,
certainly shouldn't be doing jiu-jitsu if you can't hold a nice flat foot squat. Now,
sure.
sometimes there's a reason. A person has had a broken ankle or ankle surgery, or it's due to something like an old injury. But most of the time, it's a stiffness. So I was working with this guy, and I had to stretch his feet and his ankles. His soleus and his calf muscles and feet were incredibly tight from wearing over-engineered running shoes. I got him to kick the shoes off and got him into a more minimal type of shoe without the heel. They call it a zero drop. So
Hmm.
we got him wearing zero drop shoes, and we stretched up his calves and ankles. And then I had to work his hips individually, his adductors and his glutes, and get those stretched out a little bit. And after a couple of weeks, he was actually doing a serviceable squat. Still was uncomfortable for him, but he went from zero to hero in about 2 weeks.
Hmm.
And I've had a lot of people start just like him. And within a year, they're squatting like they do in Asia.
Hmm.
Asians usually squat really, really well. A matter of fact, in my travels in some places in the Middle East and Asia, when you go to the toilet, it's basically a hole in the floor. So you better be able to squat.
Yeah.
American tourists are horrified, but for me, I just says, yes, this is the way it should be.
Uh-huh.
A good squat shitter.
It's it's interesting that you mentioned this because a lot of the guys that follow what we're doing with Train for Longevity are older, probably over 35 to 55, and a lot of the guys I see, like you said, can't squat, but then when they go to the gym, the first thing they want to do is load up a barbell, and
Well, this is a real problem because
yeah.
a lot of trainers are not well trained.
Hmm.
You don't have to have any particular knowledge to become a trainer.
Yeah.
Usually the guy that becomes the trainer is the guy with the biggest arms and the biggest chest.
Yeah.
Because it's assumed that if you have big muscles, you know what you're doing.
Hmm.
By the way, that's the furthest from the truth. Usually the genetic superiors are the ones that have the least amount of knowledge, especially in training other people. They might know about training themselves. They certainly, usually, not always, I mean, there's always exceptions. Uh, Usually these guys don't know what they're doing, but we
Hmm.
assume because they're muscular and have good looking physiques that they know what they're doing. And they'll a lot of times just apply what they do to
Hmm.
anyone that comes through the door. So
Yep.
some poor old fellow comes in there, really immobilized and so forth, and he has bad movement patterns, totally immobile, inflexible, and this trainer will start to load him up with resistance.
Hmm.
Now, it's not always a bad thing because sometimes proper strength training and resistance training can greatly improve people's mobility. I have had the experience of taking people in their 80s that barely got up my stairs. And just after just a few months of using a hammer leg press and a hammer leg curl, and basically just like a push pull type movements, all of a sudden they're walking up the stairs like a champ.
Uh-huh.
So, and which goes back once again to my original point that it's the muscles that produce movement, not your heart and your lungs. The heart and lungs are merely supportive. So there's all of this push to get oldsters walking and doing cardio, but what they really should be doing is doing some type of resistance training. When your muscles become stronger, they become more efficient. A more efficient muscle puts less stress on the heart.
Sure.
Things like walking up a steep hill or things like walking up a flight of stairs are much easier when your muscles are stronger. Therefore, your heart doesn't have to work quite as hard.
And if you strength train properly, you're going to work your heart no matter what you're doing, as long as you're
That's
moving
right.
your body. Yeah.
I use a form of training called high intensity training, not to be confused with high intensity interval training.
Hmm.
But high intensity training, basically you work in a circuit and you do an exercise to momentary muscular failure, which scares people. All that means is an engineering term. It just means you work until your muscles are totally fatigued.
Hmm.
And I'll do this like twice a week. And you don't really need a lot of time. This is a very intense style workout, just as his name would imply. And pretty much one set to momentary muscular failure, you have all the stimulus that you're ever going to need to produce really good results.
And then, you've got over 50 years of training experience. What types of things do you think that as people get older, that they should just get away from doing in the gym and just put them behind them and focus on other things? I think, there's a propensity for always gravitating towards squat and bench press and PRs. Um, what
Well,
types?
a sign of maturity is when you no longer care
Yeah.
about the amount of weight and you're not chasing weight and reps on paper. By the way, almost any system will work. It doesn't matter. You're going to reach your genetic potential in about 3 to 5 years. If you're grossly overtraining, it will take much longer. A lot of people overtrain.
Hmm.
Sometimes when you get a guy that's been overtraining for many years and you get him to back off and get more rest, all of a sudden they start growing and get stronger. But generally speaking, within 3 to 5 years, no matter what system you use, whether it be bodyweight calisthenics or the in the hood workouts or
Hmm.
convict conditioning or Russian kettlebells or Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, it doesn't matter. You're going to reach your genetic potential. But here's the thing. Some programs are more sustainable than others. And the workouts programs that are based on always continuously trying to use more weight are not sustainable over a lifetime. They are damaging. And it's not a matter of if you're going to get hurt, it's just a matter of when. And it basically is what's created the fear in a lot of people about weight training. A lot of people that haven't weight trained, that would maybe like to get started, they get intimidated by these guys heaving these heavy weights around. And it's just absolutely unnecessary. Modern science shows us that it's not the amount of weight. A really clever person can figure out how to use a lightweight and make it really, really effective and make it really hard. By manipulating leverage and by doing slow, high tension reps, you can make a lightweight, even your body weight, seem incredibly hard. I had a group of guys here this weekend. I showed them how to do body weight squats in a way that even a guy that can squat close to 500 pounds would have difficulty performing a half dozen repetitions the way I showed it. It's just by manipulating the lever arm and manipulating leverage, and you work yourself in the weakest range of motion so that even a really super strong guy can get an amazing workout just using body weight even. But it doesn't matter. The key is sustainability. You need something that is sustainable. So I mentioned, how do you know your diet works? I mentioned that you never get sick and that you have impeccable health and that you're not fat and you don't have any digestive disturbances or bloating or gas. Well, how do you know your workout's working? Well, for one thing, you never get hurt. You should never, never, never get hurt in the gym. If you're injuring yourself in the gym, then you're not training right. You don't know what you're doing, which causes some confusion because for some people, weightlifting is their sport. They compete in powerlifting or Olympic lifting. That's their sport.
Yep.
But there's this type of training called general training that does not involve, the competitive lifts.
Yeah.
So if you're a CrossFit athlete, okay, you're competing in exercise.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable. You're going to get hurt. But I'm talking about for normal training, for normal people that just want general strength to do other things well. Maybe you still play some recreational sport. You want to keep yourself strong. Maybe you just want to look good in a bathing suit. You don't need to do a lot of crazy explosive lifts and complicated exercises. Just doing basic, simple things like push-ups or bench press, military press or Hindu push-ups, pull-ups. If you can't do pull-ups, you can always do pull-downs, chin-ups, squats, deadlifts, some type of trunk curl. Maybe you have a 45-degree back extension. Basic exercises.
Yeah.
And I call them general exercises because they're not competitive lifts.
Sure.
If you do those things regularly, you're going to stay very strong and mobile to the day you die. But don't expect to keep getting results. What you're doing is you're trying to hold on to what you've built over a lifetime. So anyone out there that's been training, let's say, more than 5 years and is over 40, you're starting to lose what you've built now. So your whole idea is to try to maintain what you've built. And for people that have never lifted, it doesn't matter what age you start. You can still increase your strength and muscularity to a significant degree. But you're never going to look like the guys in the magazines or whatever,
Yeah.
A lot of people don't get that either. The magazine exercise industry promises you that, if you take the supplement or you do our secret routine of the month, or you'll see like, I don't know, some action movie star, like I like Jason Statham, he has a great physique. Or, I just read about the Batman workout. I think it was in Men's Health. And people assume that if they do that routine, that they're going to get the results like these movie stars or these actors or or look like the cover man on the Men's Health.
Yeah.
But if you think of it like height, right? Your propensity for growing muscle is genetic. So think of like tall people, close to 8 feet tall. There are some people 8 feet tall. There's not many of them, but they're out there. And there's a bunch in the NBA and so forth that are like over 7'5", but not very many. And they really stand out when you see them. At the other end of the spectrum, you have midgets. You have people that don't get much more than 3 feet. They stay little and tiny all their lives. And then you have the vast majority of people in the middle, average height. some taller, some shorter, but everything in between. That's the way it is for muscularity. You got some people like the 8 foot tall, 7'5" guys. There's very few of them, but they exist. They're the guys that you see in the gyms and the covers of the magazines. You know, they're the guys that, you know, people lust after and want, you know, the physiques. They want to look like that. And then you have the other extreme, you know, guys with almost no potential, like a Woody Allen kind of figure, you know, very skinny, no potential for muscular size and strength. But most people are in between. And there's been a lot of frustration in the fitness industry because people have this unrealistic idea of what they can build and what they can't. And the vast majority of people are never going to have big G whiz muscles and be really big and muscular.
Yeah.
They're just not. There's a lot of people that do have the potential, but man, you know who those guys are. You knew who the fastest kid was when you were in third or fourth grade. You know who the best soccer player was when you were in junior high.
Mm-hmm.
You knew the guy that was the strongest kid in your classroom when you were in eighth and ninth grade. You already knew that. And if you weren't that guy, there's a very good chance that you're never going to be that guy.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important for people to go in with open eyes, because a lot of people quit out of frustration. You know, they just get disappointed and they, you know. So when next time you see a genetic wonder in front of the mirror pumping his muscles, just walk the other way. And you probably should do almost the exact opposite of what he's doing.
I tell people to even get off Instagram. Yeah, the people on you know, unfortunately, those on Instagram and Facebook, those who post the most pictures tend to be the people with the most genetic gifts. So then those of us that follow them see like, oh my gosh, if I do what this guy's going to do, I'm going to look like that person. And
you're not. You can follow the same exact guy. For every YouTube wonder, there's 1,000 guys that did the same routine that ended up getting hurt, burnt out, injured, sick. You know, so you got these YouTube influencers, and you know these people look wonderful, and you know, of course, I admire what they do. That's not to say that just because you're genetically predisposed to gaining muscle that you don't work. I mean, some of these people go at it like a part-time job, man. You know, they live in the gym, and that's a whole nother psychological. You know, they get all their esteem and all their admiration in the gym. You know, standing, pumping, and preening in the mirror. The girls taking selfies of the butt. You know, they love to be in the gym because this is what gives them their greatest satisfaction. You know, they become basically body worshipers. You know, they become narcissists and just totally fall in love with their own image. Unfortunately, it's unsustainable. You know, unsustainable. And, you know, if you're basing your working out on just the look, it doesn't last. You know, everyone gets old, everyone gets wrinkled. You know, it's really, really hard. You're not going to slow down that aging process that much. You can look years younger and feel years younger and stay strong right up until the end. But, you know, it shouldn't be based on just how you look.
For sure.
So I always say health, number one. You're training for your health. So anything that you would take that would undermine your health, for example, anabolic steroids are known to be dangerous. So if you're taking any kind of hormone supplement, you're making a big mistake. And, you know, half these other pills, powders, and potions also are harmful. So, you know, get rid of all that. So you should be lifting for health, number one. Then you should be lifting and training for performance, for being able to do things, you know, not just look pretty, but to be able to actually do stuff. So you should take that strength and apply it to some kind of sport or recreation or hobby. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be kayaking or canoeing or playing golf or tennis, playing hoops down to the neighborhood, you know, whatever you like to do. But you want to apply that to some type of sport and not make the activity itself your sport. And then, of course, you know, there's the look. If those first two are in place, really good health, and you have good performance, well, then you're going to look like an athlete. You might not look like a bodybuilder. You might not look like a fitness model, but you'll certainly look fit and have that, you'll move better. Uh, your posture will be much better, and you'll have the look. You'll look as good as you're ever going to look.
Yeah, that's super important. Yeah, understanding what optimal is for you, and not looking externally, trying to compare yourself. I think as soon as you do that, and that's in everything, your career, as soon as you start just focusing on
Everything.
yourself, yeah, happiness.
You got to look at where you started and where you've come. And, but there's some pockets of civilization, like the Koreans, they don't care. They basically inherited a house from, 6 generations back. So they're always going to have a little place to stay, and they produce a lot of their own food right in their own backyard. They don't really travel that much, although, it's pretty cheap to travel around Greece. Yeah, many of them have pretty menial jobs, but it's enough money if they need to take the ferry to the mainland or to another island, they can do it. And, the only expense really is, to just, buy some food staples here and there, or gasoline for their motor scooter or whatever. So, it just depends. If you're really satisfied with little, you don't really need to stress yourself trying to chase the almighty dollar.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, Steve, we're getting toward the end here. What's next for you, and where can people? Is there anything you want to highlight for everybody aside from your new mobility program, which we plan on sending out to everybody that follows us?
I'm going to go back to Port Townsend. Like I said, I already bought the tiny home. It's a very small little house. I feel very good in small spaces. I didn't want to have some big space. And, with ownership, there always comes complications. So this is just about as complicated as I need it. I'm going to set up a little exercise studio. I'll be teaching jujitsu at a local straight blast gym there in Port Townsend. And people have already mentioned that they want to come to me now. So rather than me going around the world, I'll have people come to me. And I still may do a seminar or two within the continental United States, but I'll probably curtail overseas travel, at least in the next few years. Maybe I'll get the travel bug again. We'll see how that works. I'm never going to say never, but for the next couple of years, I'm going to pretty much stay put in my little tiny house.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on your new place and the new program. I did your follow along yesterday, a day in the life, and was amazed at how many positions were very difficult to get in. And I do a lot of different things. I thought I was flexible and mobile especially until I started squatting and prying my hips open. So I encourage anybody who is listening to this right now to click the link below to get Steve's program. And yeah, Steve, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I hope to talk to you again soon, and then maybe even get to come up to Port Townsend to train with you personally in the near future.
That would be great fun. It would really have a blast. So thanks for having me on your show, and
All right.
I'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks.
Bye now.
Yep. See ya.